The Gauteng Premier Panyaza Lesufi has announced that his administration will dismantle a growing number of informal settlements mushrooming around the province. Lesufi says unprecedented evictions are on the horizon and they will come unannounced. He says this is part of his government's effort to curb land invasions and enforce housing regulations. According to the Premier, government land is increasingly being occupied illegally, often outside the formal housing allocation processes. According to the latest Gauteng Human Settlements 2024 annual report, there are about 700 informal settlements across Gauteng, and that number keeps growing. So the question is, how does the province respond to these growing pressures? Let's unpack it all. I'm joined by Zanoxolo Futwa, a regional planner, and Thapelo Mohapi, a General Secretary of Abahlali, baseMjondolo, a movement of informal settlement dwellers. So let me welcome both of my guests. Zanoxolo, perhaps let me start with you and ask you to just reflect on the problem as we sit with it at the moment. We cite the figures coming out of the annual report of human settlements that talks about 700 informal settlements, and the number keeps growing. What's your understanding of the contours and the extent and depth of the problem in the province of Gauteng?
Thank you very much, Tulas. Good day to the listeners. Indeed, informal settlements is a huge challenge. And it is, I agree with the Premier, it is on the growing trajectory. But there are reasons that explain this growth and the concentration of this type of challenge in South Africa, particularly in our urban areas and cities, which are concentrated in the Gauteng province particularly. One, it is informed by a problem of urbanization that is happening at a very fast pace. The World Bank report indicates that we will be sitting at 80% urbanization in the country by 2050. Mm-hmm. We already have a concentration of people in smaller urban centers in the country. The recent statistics by Stats SA indicated in 2022-2023 that out of the 257 municipalities, only 17 municipalities house the demand for our population residency in the country.
Sure.
And this is a challenge because the urban systems that are designed in these towns and cities that constitute our municipalities are not designed to support the fast pace of growing demand on them. For example, the urban systems for people to have shelter, water, services and amenities, they are not growing or strengthened and expanded at the pace at which we receive populations in our towns and our cities. Mm-hmm. So that is at the core of this problem.
Yeah.
Adding to that, there are other factors that maybe we will have a conversation about, which relate to our history of why we are where we are today in the country.
Absolutely. I'll turn to those in a moment, but let me bring in Thapelo into this conversation. Thapelo, the word that I saw in part of the reporting on what the Premier had to say included words like we are going to, quote unquote, crush these informal settlements, and saying that in terms of the evictions, sometimes they will happen in the middle of the night, and a great deal of concern about increasing invasion of state-owned land, and that in some instances that ends up being parceled and sold off by people who have no authority to be doing that. Just your own reflections on the problem as diagnosed by the Premier, as well as the fix that he is saying is going to bring unprecedented evictions.
Good afternoon, Thulasizwe. Good afternoon to the viewers. First and foremost, I would like to say that the comments by the Premier Panyaza Lesufi were unfortunate, and it shows a government that is detached on reality that is happening on the ground. It shows a government that is not prepared to actually address the issues of the informal settlements or homelessness of the people on the ground. First and foremost, what he said is problematic in terms of the Constitution, because the Constitution states that in order for one to evict anyone in their home, they must have a court order that is given by a court of law after relevant circumstances have been considered of that particular individual. So people who are living in informal settlement are human beings, they are voters, they have rights just like anyone else. Problematic is the fact that he says they're going to be done in 2 a.m., a reminiscence of the apartheid government in the past. So it is unfortunate that a government of that day who claims to be the custodians of the very same constitution is actually wanting to violate the very same constitution that we've worked so hard for. But there are many other ways that needs to be done in order to deal with the current status quo of informal settlement in South Africa. Yes, the statistics that have been shown are a problem, but they show a desperation, a need of land, a need for us to understand where we come from apartheid, which did not allow black people to access cities, but also this possession of the land that we have never had the access to land as black people. Mm-hmm. And in order for us to deal with this, we need to have an engagement, a meaningful engagement with the people on the ground. There is a policy that is there that needs to be implemented. It's called the upgrading of informal settlements policy. If we implement that policy properly, not everyone who lives in the informal settlement is a beneficiary or waiting for government to build their homes for them. If you issue statutes of tenure to the people who already have settlement and they build themselves, you provide incremental services, you would not be in this crisis where we are today.
Yeah. Let me stick with you, Mr. Mohapi, for a moment. I don't imagine that the Premier, and I'd really be surprised, and I'm not meaning to speak on his behalf, but I would be really surprised if he envisages an upsurge in evictions that bypasses the requisite court processes. It would really be surprising and actually would stand to be condemned. But in terms of the problem as he's identifying it, do you share the sentiment that there is, at the very least, a challenge that says, in some instances, the growth in informal settlements and taking over of land largely owned by the state, in some instances, is driven by activities other than activities that take advantage of the desperation that people have for access to land. So in that, you now find people who take on that land and then they parcel it out and they become the people who sell parcels of land, as opposed to facilitation of access to land in an orderly and a proper way, which, granted, is not happening at the scale it should be happening.
Yes, there is a very serious crisis when it comes to homelessness, but also we do know that there are people who we call shack lords who build a lot of shack farming, and I think that is another element that needs to be dealt with. But once you blanket it, you will be dealing with ordinary people who are poor, who are genuine, who want to be citizens of this country.
Yeah.
So that's where me and you as black people know that in the rural areas there's dire poverty. And when I find a job in Durban or Johannesburg and elsewhere, the accommodation is elastic. I want to feed my family. I want to go and work in the cities. While I'm in the cities, I need a certain accommodation. And I think the government of that day did not pay for urbanization in the way that they should. And the other thing, I think we should develop our rural areas so that we do not have more people that are coming into our city. Well, if our universities exist in the rural areas, in the Eastern Cape and Zululand and elsewhere, if proper job opportunities are also available there, then people would not have to come to the cities and work. But because everything is more centralized and people are unable to actually have no choice but to come to the city. That's an opportunity. Yeah.
Let me pick up on that point with Mr. Futwa. Mr. Futwa, is this the historical dynamic that you were talking to, planning for urbanization? Let me just give an anecdotal example, just from mere observation, that usually when a new, let's say, new shopping center opens up, with it come some economic opportunities, but many of those opportunities are not high-end, high-paying jobs, and therefore those people that take up those opportunities may not be willing and ready and able to spend a lot of money on transport, and likely the trend will be that a new informal settlement will spring up that will seek to bring them closer to where they work. Is that what you were talking about, planning, urban planning for the kinds of demands that we are facing now?
Thank you. Yes, indeed. I think there is a context, and the context to the factors that give rise to what we see as informal settlements has a number of dimensions. One of them is economic, and they are social, and there's also other variables, particularly the one that you are mentioning. In the example you are mentioning, people move from places of desperation because there is a challenge with the macroeconomy that is not growing at the desired pace to deal with our social needs. So they move to places of no opportunity, to places of assumed or perceived opportunity. Most of these are concentrated in where development is happening, which is around urban centers. You would find that people that enter our towns, from the research that we conducted in 2022 on what informs informality, one of the findings was that there is a correlation between the slow pace of urban reform in the country and the growing informality in the form of the urban sprawl and informal settlements that are around our towns and cities. Two, there is a mismatch between the pace at which we are affirming the poor in the country. In other words, lifting the people that are at the bottom of the harshness of poverty to be able to participate in the mainstream economy. And those people are the people that constitute the category we're mentioning of people that are desperate looking for a job. And while you look for a job, you want a place to cover yourself and to stay. And you want that place closer to a point of opportunity. These are the realities, unfortunately. One of them is that we end up punishing a poor with 40% of his meager income on transport because of the manner in which we have approached the incremental execution of the instruction in the Constitution, Section 26, on everyone will have access to adequate housing. We also have created difficulties with the inadequate or lack of efficiency in our cooperative governance, which enabled challenges of speculative crime to grow problems that makes the problem more dynamic, such as, for example, illegal occupation of property and land in our places. The Premier was mentioning, for example, how this affects the ability of the state to acquire, assemble land and redistribute that land back to development needs. And the research that we did also indicated that in a period of 18 months striding a national election, there are also other variables that are political that makes the unlawful land occupation to increase or land invasion to increase and spike up. We are in that period leading to 2026 local government elections.
Wow.
Thanks.
What a fascinating conversation. I've got to thank you. I'm completely out of time. Would have wanted to continue with it, but I've learned a lot. It's been enlightening. That's Zanoxolo Futwa, who is a regional planner. We were, of course, also joined by Thapelo Mohapi of Abahlali, baseMjondolo. So a fascinating conversation. And from that, I think the big takeaway from me is that there are many dynamics and elements at play in the problem of landlessness, as well as the mushrooming of informal settlements. And perhaps the Premier of Gauteng may find it might not be as easy as he anticipates in terms of the processes around evictions.